And here is my mountain.
Wow.
So you'll see that it's a lot of the islands, because they're volcanic. So a lot of them they've got just the mountain in the middle, and then sort of a road that'll go right around. So it's really lush, which is actually really quite different to where I was sort of brought up. But yeah, when I find my mountain, that's where I go to Hikurangi. And this mountain, it's moved all through the Pacific too. You find Hikurangi in Tahiti and Rarotonga. I think there's about 6 of them at home. So we really did take our mountains wherever we went. And this is one of my good sisters, Fiona, and this is in the village of Maliere. So when we say our house greets your house, our houses are really important sort of gathering spaces, especially because you'll have one big main house where everybody will gather before you sort of go out to live. And there's just, so I think I prepared this years ago, but this is really, you can just sort of start to see the thatching and just the sort of environment really that these tatau come from. And here is a picture, so I don't have to undress completely. So this is my body, and it's a mixture of sort of contemporary and traditional. So a lot of the patterning is very traditional. The placement is very contemporary, except for the malu, which I'll talk about. So this body of mine, when I say that I'm clothed in ceremony, so you know, we're sort of asking a bit about, you know, how do you define nakedness? You know, if you're actually clothed in your ancestors. So I've had a few interesting arguments over the years about what constitutes nudity and why it's such a terrible thing, because it is not. So a lot of these are gifts, and I also have a mixture of Māori and Samoan, and that's really to do with my journey and what has been, a lot of them have been gifted to me. So really for this talk about tatau is definitely seen through a woman's perspective. Actually, it's, you know, mamalu, so it really is sort of, you know, you'd get a much different talk if it was a male, and you'd give a much different talk if it was by a practitioner. So I'm coming from a perspective of somebody who's been really connected to what we call the kind of Renaissance. First was our language and arts, and then part of the other cultural Renaissance was actually to decolonize our actual bodies, so that, you know, we could bring them back to a natural, for us, a natural state. Now, I've been to a few places and I've realised they have no idea where I'm talking about. So, yeah, Europe's over there. No, America's over there. And you'll see what is known as the Pacific Ocean. So that was named by a Spanish sailor who actually, he got becalmed. So he called it Pacific. Like, it's really, like, it is so not Pacific. It is not peaceful. And then it was further chopped into sort of the Polynesian Triangle, and then it was sort of reduced into Polynesia, Melanesia, Micronesia. So that this is how the Europeans sort of divided us all up. You see French Polynesia, Tahiti Society, you know. So there's a lot of these old names here, like Society Islands. So we're slowly trying to eliminate those sort of words and bring back our own names that have been there for. We're pretty young in the Pacific. That's why, you know, when I am in Europe, you know, you feel
power of 5,000 years of history here. You can feel it. You feel it in the land. You know, sometimes standing in, you know, with your 600-year-old house, whereas your house was 600 years. I mean, it's like, I think one of the oldest houses in New Zealand is like 150 years. So, you know, in terms of a Western house. So we are the babies, especially here, because we were the last, Aotearoa was the last to come down, and they reckon there was quite a few waves. They reckon there was one wave that came from Taiwan, sort of came down through the Philippines, came down through here, came down. So it actually, so there's Tonga and Tuvalu. So my great-grandmother comes from Tuvalu. There's Tonga, here's Samoa, and then it swept into the east. And oh God, this doesn't even have Easter. The Rapa Nui doesn't even have Easter Islands. And then there's really strong sort of our purako of, they named the wakas, the canoes that then came down into Aotearoa. So it's 1/3 of the Earth's surface. And so part of our modern history is out of Te Ao Māori here. And they reckon there's a line that went to Easter Islands. There is from the same thing, they went up to Hawaii, and then they came through the Cook Islands and came down to Aotearoa. So it's a family of language and culture. So but yeah, so it's my hood. And we look at it like, you know, we don't, some people just see the little dots and the emptiness, whereas we look at the ocean, we treat it like the land, and it's sort of, those are our motorways, is these great currents. So that was, yeah. And I live there. And this is Te Ika a Maui. So this is the fish of Maui, and which he fished up from the canoe here. So it was never sort of, now it's North Island, South Island. But here you can see this fish like a big stingray. You know those big stingrays? So there is the tail and his wings. Yeah. Yeah. So this is, and Maui is one of our great sort of tricksters. Maui of 1,000 tricks. I was going to start off with how the actual tatau sort of came to Samoa. So, and this is an artwork by a very good friend of mine called Shigeyuki Kihara, who is now just did Venice last year. This is really rather fabulous. This is one of her first sort of works, and this was her way of describing these two women that I'm going to tell you about. So the Samoan tatau is a 3,000-year-old unbroken cultural practice. So for a lot of the missionaries, they managed to erase it off the bodies of a lot of the islands, but for some reason the Samoans really held on to it. And a lot of us think that it, mainly because it's more of a political sort of thing, but the origins of the tatau start with two twins, Tai Ma and Tili Whainga, and they were born back to back, so they were co-joined. So they could never face each other. So these two women had a wanderlust, and they used to wander the islands, and they were actually extraordinary women. They were warriors. They were known to as men killers, and they also picked and chose quite a few husbands. So they had a few husbands. They left children. They left them with their husbands and went off. Wow, girls, yeah. And they had this wanderlust, and they would go around the island, and because they were such revered woman, great feasts would be prepared in their honour, and eventually they got bored and they swam to Fiji. So that was one of the neighbouring islands, and when they got to the shores of Fiji, they were greeted by women who all were tatau, and they were really quite astonished that these women of such high ranking would not be marked. So when the two women prepared to go back home, they were gifted the art of tatau, and they were gifted the ways of how to make the ink, of how to make the chisels and the patternings, and they were sent on their way with a chant: it is for the woman, not the men. It is for the woman, not the men. It is for the woman, not the men. Now it's a long way from Fiji to Samoa. And when they came into that reef where the water goes shallow and full of light, they were exhausted and they were hungry. And deep in the bottom of the deep in the bottom of the shallows, that does not make sense. They saw a great clam, vasua, and they decided that they couldn't wait, and they dove down into the bottom and they devoured this clam, which has got a whole lot of other things going on that we can get into later, if you know what a clam looks like. And they came back up to the surface, and they started again with their chant. It is for the man, not the woman. It is for the men, not the woman. It is for the men, not the woman. So by the time they got to the shores of Samoa, the chant had changed, and they had in their distraction to satiate their hunger, they flipped the script. So they came to the shores of Samoa, and of course all the villagers were so happy to have their atua back, and they would celebrate with great feasts and dances. But it was one particular village in Savai'i that hosted them with the best food and the bestest of everything, that the twins decided to gift this art of the tatau to this family. And this family, Suluapi, is actually where I learnt the story from, and this was the first person who sort of like tatau my body. And there were 4 families that were given this gift of the tatau practice. And actually, when you break the word tatau down, we know it as tattoo. It's one of the only words from the Moana that have actually entered, a global vernacular. So tattoo, with tatau. So it's sort of, and this is how I first came across the story. So this is another friend of mine, Greg Semu, and it was in the garage out in South Auckland that I heard the story whilst watching my dear friend go through the traditional markings. So up on the sleeves, it's not a particularly traditional, whatever that word means, placement. But here's the pe'a. So this is the male tatau. And it's based on a flying fox. And a flying fox, have you seen the fruit bats? They're really quite big animals. And they're known to be tenacious and intelligent, and they fight fiercely for their families. So they are very nurturing animal, with a strong sense of responsibility to their families. So they say the pe'a, for the men, to not only prepare their bodies to accept great pain, because there's no doubt about it, this is a painful experience. And there's so many meanings, but I usually leave that to the men. I know a little bit about the patterns, but I really concentrate on what is on my body, what is my personal story. So, but this is the pe'a, the flying fox, and he's a great, and so this maybe will take
superhumans can maybe do it in 3 days.
Wow.
Yeah, superhumans, like those are, because the tofunga, the practitioner, he will really understand how much the body can take. Some of them take months, some of them take years. So they will really understand the limits of the body. It depends, some people bleed a lot, some people don't. And then there's also sort of, and they're really expensive. Here is the back. So in the, I always go pre-contact, the pe'a that was for usually the chief's son, the manaia, it would be decided by others what time that he would be tataued, and then usually you never do anything by yourself in the islands, which is why I bought the videos yesterday of all my mates, because it's not just me, it's me. And so you'd be there with your friends, your family. It was, it's not something that you go away and do by yourself. And also the patterns, you don't ask, can I have that? It doesn't work like that. The tofunga will know your family, and you should know your family history, the village, where you're from, and from there they will decide. So the structure of the pe'a is basically unchanged, but the practitioner will have his own little kind of ways of using those particular patterns, and some of them we're gonna break down. And so, but for the men, there's this saying that the women have babies, the men have the pe'a. So they acknowledge that the pain level is about the same. There's definitely some painful bits going on in there. So, and this is the malu. Oh my goodness, I didn't even put a picture of my one in there, sorry. This is another one of my friend's malu. So the malu is a term that means, there's all sorts of ways to look at it. I used to sit at the feet. So a lot of my knowledge here, it hasn't come from a school or books. The knowledge that I'm sharing with you has come from the Tofunga Paolo Suluwaki. Because I used to sit at his feet while Greg would be getting his done, and I was always the nuisance that asked way too many questions. So, but it was his generosity that he shared with me. I used to go, what is the malu? It can mean dignity. It can mean shelter, like if you literally. But also I'd go, what is the malu? And he would, and this is the actual malu, this pattern here, and the rest is there to kind of support and wrap around it. And he would say, oh, it's the 4 sides of the house. So I'd be sitting there like, and then he'd look at me and he goes, well, what is the first house that you ever lived in? The womb. The womb. The womb. The 4 sides of the house. And we call that the whare tangata, the house of the people. So it's a very powerful sort of space. And so these 4 sides of the house, and then as I sort of started to kind of unpack it, I started to think about it more. In the village setting, where I told you we greet you with our houses too, if you were inside the house, you see all those posts, you had a place inside that house. It's like having a place inside your community. And sort of, pre-contact, if you lived outside that house, you weren't protected by your family, by your village, and you were in a really vulnerable position living outside that house. So it really started to take on new meaning to me. And a lot of this, it's like that whole kind of grasshopper guru thing where they kind of throw you a little something and you've got to work it, 5 years later. So there's literal ways you can look at it, but then you kind of peel back a lot of the metaphors and what they're saying. So really, to have shelter within your house means that you are contributing and
and an active member of your clan. And actually it was, now we have chosen tribes and chosen family because, the structures have changed, but the structure has not changed on the body. The female, there's times where, like, the classic thing, male anthropologists would come in and talk to male, and they would talk about, because there's a lot of gendered aspects to our culture too, even though, like, our pronouns, ia is she, he, them, all in one. But there's definitely on the body and for the work that's done, there's the work that the men do and the work that the women do. And a lot of the malu, it was written, I've seen it written, that female Tatatau in Samoa did not exist. And I was like, you can tell that to my great aunt. So it's really, or they go, oh, this is just Tafunga, he was just practicing. They just practice on the woman. So we've really, I think that's why that little bit that we'll watch soon of Marks of Mana was really important for the wahine to actually kind of bring back our mana to our markings and our bodies. So that was a big part of it. And there's a lot of these patterns I'm going to go into a little bit more detail later on for us.
So, sorry, can I ask a question?
Yes, of course.
So the story that you told us about how the chant became reversed. Since then, it's only in modern times that you've kind of reversed it back.
Yes, it has been debated for years, and that's actually where Christianity was not particularly helpful in terms of, one, they just wanted it eradicated. If they found people with tatau on their bodies, especially in the Cook Islands and Tahiti, what they started to do was they would tattoo over them. And they would actually, like, even tattoo like a crime on you. So they turned something that was a cultural mark of dignity, rank, and power, and they turned it into something to be shameful of, and they would literally defigure the bodies. For some reason, it did not happen in Samoa. We're still all trying to unpack that. But in the meantime, the patriarchy really took its hold on our bodies, because the ones on our hands nearly disappeared. We didn't have images of them. That could have totally disappeared. So there's, and now we've got one of our first ever female practitioners, because all the men finally got together, and there's a different generation of men too, and they're like, well, there's no rule that says they can't. It's okay. So now they're actively teaching her the way. So this is my body. This is my little nephew. My brothers was in the room, and I never actually thought that I would ever wear the malu. I was New Zealand born. I didn't have my language. I had all that angst of, I am not worthy. And the practitioner, Paolo Suluapi, before I left to go to England, he said, come on, you get your malu now. And I was like, oh, well, if he thinks that I'm ready. And then I moved, and then he passed away. He'd already marked the backs of my legs. So this is his brother. It's so interesting. My brother ends up living in Australia. He wants to get his pea. And he hadn't talked to our father, who's a Samoan, for years. And I was just like, bro, it's not about you. You can't just decide. I said, you better start speaking to the old boy about this, because he was the one in our family who would have worn it, who would have carried it. So to cut a long story short, it brought the family back together, and then our father gave him the blessing to get the peka. Otherwise, he wouldn't have got it. It's not You know, there's some people will do it without the permissions, but you know, deep in our souls, it's that connective space, that passing of moli that I was talking about. Different body, same moli. So different time, same space, the space of the body. So my brother, and usually, as I said, you never get any, you don't do things by yourselves, and actually as the oldest of the family and as the sister, I hold a special place in my family. And usually it's the role to be the soa, to be this your partner, and you know, I'd get my malu. So I turned up, I'd been living in England, I turned up in Australia to support my brother, and this guy's like, I've been waiting for you on the mat. And I was just like, and that's where sometimes you go, oh, okay. And for years I had got everywhere on my body, but I had never touched the thighs. So it's quite interesting. I always call that a tipuna intervention, an ancestral intervention. Just something always told me to leave that space clear. And especially when I received this one, I told my mum, I was like, no, go up. And he's like, no, you might get your malu one day. So it was really beautiful. Yeah, so this is Pitelo, and this is his son, and it really is an art form that is still to this day passed on through the families. And you can see, yeah, there's no sort of, they don't draw it up. You'll see he just lines it up, and he just goes and literally taps it on your skin. These are the tools, which always cracks me up because they're called ow. Ow, 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 ow. Sorry. Oh. So yeah, these were made of bone. I think back in the days it was human bone, good strong bone, and then sort of they will now make it out of the boar's tusk. So these are made out of boar's tusks, and actually I think so. This is a set that my friend Croc made. Yeah, so there's the pig's tusk, and this is the spine from the urchin, you know, the sea urchins. And so this is what, I mean, they'll split this, but this is the tool that they use to sharpen the little teeth. So it's sort of, yeah, there's some spears. And this is the llama nuts. So these are the nuts. Usually the woman, the grandmother, or also at nights, they use them as candles. They thread them up, burn them. They collect the soot, and that is what they make the ink from. So there's the ink, there's your sharpener, and this is a piece of bark cloth that would wipe away, and that's, you know, these materials that get turned into the, what they call the comb. So you can see. Okay, here we go.
So much emphasis is put on the ocean, on the distances between us. But the real river, the real energy, the real currents, I believe, is in the blood. And it's the blood that spills when you take it. It's the blood that links us together. Moko is about transformation. And I think Pe'a and Tatau and Kakao, all those traditions state the same thing and serve the same purpose. And what is really exciting is that it happens on the living human body. And I think there's nothing more erotically raucous than a bunch of inked polys, Māori, Samoan, Tahitian, Hawaiian, jumping around together, showing each other their ink. You know, it really is an incredible celebration of who we are through our ink.
we are putting our marks back onto our bodies so that we can be in touch with our ancestral past, so that we can remember. I always tell kids that it's who we are, it's who we want to be, and it's essentially our libraries. This is our Google. And for me personally, because there's so many stories embedded in the marks, they consistently keep me in contact with our histories. It's not something that I can just put away in the cupboard. Not like maybe a dance costume where you do your dance and you put it in the cupboard and maybe stays there for another year. When you're tatau, it's present. You're present with your ancestors every day, and it's a great reminder.
In the Cook Islands we call it maru. So that is reclaiming that art form. Because we didn't have any records of the maru in the Cook Islands, but we know that we were heavily tattooed and that on raw on the legs, it just made sense that we had a very similar design sense to the maru of Samoa, but the patterns is what defines it and makes it different. So you'll notice on my maru that I've used the patterns like the pupu inano, the maru itiki, and the mokora, and the papabaro, and the manutai especially, this one that I really connect with, that reflect who I am and my connection to the Cook Islands. I think my maru speaks a slightly different language, and it's reconnecting to my ancestors. So in more of a way than, say, getting a tattoo on my arm or anything like that. What my maru does is I'm trying to reclaim what's been lost.
We've seen a lot of revival happen in other parts of the Pacific Islands, definitely starting from the Polynesian Islands and moving across the Pacific, and the Philippines was kind of one of those last places to have that momentum to really share with the world the revival and sharing culture and to be sharing tattoo work.
In the Philippines, in the past, women were the tattooers, and now we're continuing that tradition.
A lot of our people have chosen not to remember, and so this is why the tattoo is so important, is that we need to reawaken the revival and have a voice.
It's one of the loudest ways that we can solidify our identity. A lot of the patterns are similar. We have, I know some of the vegetation is patterns, but there's a lot of things that came over, just like how the cultures came from somewhere before. And so it's really neat to see almost like an evolution throughout time.
Through the marks, you can see where the different voyages, so there's a definite connection to Southeast Asia. Just through the designs, you can see it. What you see on repeat are frigatebirds, centipedes, they're everywhere, but then also the diamond. You can see that, and it doesn't start with us, it goes further. The diamond, for me, it's become a woman's symbol and how women are the foundation of life.
So the diamond moon shape, to me is sort of the be all and end all of the female tatau. It's where all life starts, it's the whare, it's all aspects of a woman. It's connected to childhood, fertility, femininity, our place in society, our place within our culture. So it's everything in that one little pattern. So that is why I think people do sort of react and get conscious of how it's used.
When I first sat down with Paro, I'll start with Paro because I used to go, what's the my studio? And the first thing he said to me is the four sides of the house. He looked at me and goes, well, what's the first house you live in? And I was like, oh, of course. It's the house of the people, it's the whare pangata.
How do you know? Figure it out.
How do I know that I'm not?
Trust the patriarchy, get involved. Skip. Yeah. Sorry.
Read the man.
messages of the man. It's about our story of creation. The growing of the seed is protected by custom, by usage, by history, but most importantly by theology. And the man means, how do you protect, the making of the human being?
Ipuwhakairo is a carved word, but it's also a metaphor for the non-spinners, like for the private parts of a woman. And in both of these metaphors, contained within the context of these incredibly erotic, raunchy, fabulous ancient charts, are all these references to genital tattooing, like to the marking of the gate through which a new human will come into the world. Cambridge, I found a dipot called an okonawa who made of stone. This particular vessel was used only in the tattooing ceremonies of women on their private parts by other women.
So in the Fijian practice of traditional tattooing, it was women who marked and women who wore the marks. When it was practiced in Fiji, it was about the movement from girlhood to womanhood. It's a triangular marking on the mons pubis, on the vulva. It goes around the waist and it's on the buttocks. I don't know why it was so important to mark that area. I mean, it's the center of the universe. It has brought the importance of my body back to the forefront. Fijian women's tattoo was discontinued with the advent of Christianity. When Fijian women put on the mumu, everything from neck down became invisible. And so our bodies are not written into history. And that's a tragedy. What wearing these marks means is it's unshackling ourselves from the burdens of colonial hang-ups. I've had to confront my relationship with my body. I've had to confront how other people might see it, how other people might see the sharing of it, accepting who I am, and that's a powerful thing of being marked.
The female has always been present in the story of Tatau, from the twins through to the Fijian woman's Venkia, through to the Papua New Guinea woman, through to our Filipino cousins, and in Tahiti, and with Maori. There's always been women present in this art form, and especially within the mythologies. So I think when the men came and they wrote about men's things for men's, they didn't acknowledge that all were shown that these beautiful markings were specifically for us too. So that'll teach them.
I think that journey of women bringing the akwa to us, the journey is a long thing. So the journey needs to be continued. There is no end to this journey. And each of us and each generation have a responsibility to help that journey live on. And not just in our memories, but now on our bodies, on our skin. So what Mā Tia Whainga brought then will continue into my great-grandchildren's generation. That speaks to them about who they are as women and what their roles and responsibilities are, because Malanga needs to be hosted. We need to be able to host those stories. We need to be able to care for those stories. We need to be able to keep that legend and keep that story going.
I cannot understand why, as a young person, you would choose to wear tattoos that are barbed wire or a flower, when you could be wearing your grandmother's marks all the way back to who knows when you could be wearing, in our equivalents, diamonds.
This is the gift that we've been given. These are our marks of mana, and we have to keep it alive.
They make me all emotional. So the full documentary is in that link. How do I get out? Yeah, that was part 5.
Would you like to change the slide?
I was just going to go back because it was really, it's really interesting actually, like even just to share that with you over here, without it sort of, because for those women to actually, for our culture to actually sort of feel, not brave, but feel powerful enough to actually reclaim our bodies and take away the exotic sexual element, we discussed it the other day, we can't help how people, reflect our bodies, but this is a huge thing for our community as women to really bring our bodies to the front, especially a lot of those older women, because that was with the advent of Christianity, that as Emma Tolbola said, that they covered us up to here, and everything from here down became invisible. So, and those dresses she was talking about, the Mother Hubbard dresses that are just great big sort of sacks, really. And in the tropics, I don't know how they could handle to wear them. So it's been a really long journey to be able to stand in the mana of those markings. And then I suppose on the flip side, you've also seen a renaissance of European tattooing, sort of in terms of just how many bodies you see it on. But we all come at it from different angles, and we've all got different stories. So essentially, a lot of the message, and why I started this particular workshop, is there's a fine line between appreciation and appropriation. And we'll find even just in the stories that we all shared this morning that you've all got really powerful stories and bodies of water and mountains that you can reach into. So these are the names, and also this, but my body's not it's not my body anymore. I really, and especially as I use it a lot, I don't just carry the symbolism, of that 3,000 years of unbroken cultural practice, but also the practitioners that have all literally, that I have shared time and space, and that they really, I can't take my body really without them anymore. So, so this is why I acknowledge Suluapi Paulo and his brother Pitello. Coltier, who sort of was indirectly taught the hand tools. He was an Englishman, but he got taught the hand tools by Paulo's apprentice, and Terry Kolo Matangi, who's now sort of breathing life back into the Tongan practice. And here our tā moko. So you saw the lady Ngahuia with talking about the, and that's a very different sort of space for our Māori women and men. But Enya Taylor, Moko Smith, who's now just using hand tools exclusively, and they learned back off the Samoans, so there was all this exchange of knowledge again happening. Paitangi Oztec, so it's very unusual for a woman to have the rapi rapi. It's usually considered sort of a male domain, and it's really interesting how I ended up with a rapi rapi too, but yeah, I am a warrior. But also I actually have, Paitangi gave me as a gift her rapi rapi. So we have the exact same marking. That's my twin. That's my soa. And it's, it's connected us forever. And, and that was a great, my beautiful special friends. And Te Rangi Tū Netana, who actually now lives and works in England. So then there's all these different sort of ways of then how it starts to spread on other cultures' bodies, and what does that mean? And it's the practitioners are the ones that are really in charge of it, and there's been lots of tension in the community about who, how, and why. So it's still a very highly contentious space. But you find if you've got that grounding of why, that's nobody can take that away from you. Nobody can take your mountains away from you. Nobody can take your waters away from you. Even if you haven't been there for a long time, maybe they don't recognise you, but those are yours. So that, I suppose, is just the founding sort of grounding principles of what tatau means to us on the bodies. As I said, I live with my ancestral past every day in the now, and I take it into the future. So that's what I mean about, this body is the genealogical matter of the past, the present, and the future. And within that genealogical matter is male and female, and all the spaces in between. And all those genetic strands are whole. Just like yourselves, you can't kind of rip your actual physical DNA apart and go, oh, well, that bit's, except for maybe you. It's like, no, 98%.
It's actually 99.
Oh, no. So when, so if you look at how they even make us look at ourselves, but, in that genetic structure, that's why I always look at the genealogical space, and then our geographical space. And those are the stories of our experiences that we can tell. Because we are the new ancestors. And as you said before, how would my I always ponder that too, because, they're probably looking at me with much bemusement. What is that? But at the end of the day, it really is a responsibility that I carry to keep that dignified space. And yeah, so that's really the end of that, just the context of where my body comes from. And I was going to go over some of the patterns, but I need pen and paper. And then we can break for lunch, I think. And then when we come back, then we're going to play. Okay? Then that's it from me. It's going to be so we've got, unusual actually, sort of, yeah, so that's one way of looking at the marks. And then, yeah, and there was a time like when I first got my hands done, there was literally 3 of us that had them on our hand. And it was people were really, they were really kind of shocked and concerned. Yeah. Are we done? Yep, we're done with that. Hope you guys aren't hungry. 15 minutes, right? And then I'll get out of that. the great thing too about later on when we get into this workshop is because I can't draw, so there's no excuses, all right. But actually, I do love about the visual translation of iconography, you know, through your eyes, and how that these icons have been sort of stripped down to their most basic. I think I'm going to have to get really big here, aren't I? I mean, that was that immediate pattern that we saw a lot on nearly, and that carries throughout the whole islands, is a manu, is a bird. And this is where I'm only going to tell you the knowledge that I was taught. So for us, this is a bird known as the ngongo. So, and the ngongo, he likes to stick by the land. Every morning, fly out to sea. Go get his kai. Every evening, fly back home. So he was a great marker for the people on those canoes, especially for the big long voyages. If they saw the ngongo, they knew they were near land because they did not go very far. So it was kind of like, oh. So I used to go, what does that mean? And that's a crazy question too, because it has layers of meaning. But really, it's a sign of hope. But it didn't make sense to me until I understood that the ngongo was that near to land. So it really is understanding your geography and understanding. Love here, I've seen all the hawks. I love that's a big animal. So that's the ngongo. And I think we heard also referred to as the manutai. That's a different bird. That's a seabird. That's the ones that go out to sea and they don't come back. And so, and that's sort of, that has a different sort of kind of connotation. Now there was this other one. I always have to refer to my hands. Oh, this I know. This sign is everywhere. And this one, and different people say different things. Again, I'm just going to tell you what I was told. This is the bent knee of the bird. And I was laughing because that bird is the tule, and the tule is one of our oldest known ancestors. It was they were the son, because there's arguments, because sometimes she, sometimes he. So I like tule. So tule was the progeny of our creator god, Tangaloa. And Tangaloa, and this was at a time when there was no land. There was only the sky and the sea. And tule would fly from the ninth layers of the heavens and fly over and would get tired. So would go back up to the ninth heavens and be like, oh, yeah. Really tiring. Can't you give me some like place to land or rest or something? So Tangaloa, the great creator god, oh yeah. So he throws a rock down, and so this rock lands. Actually, this is the story of this. So we can see the beak of the bird inside there. See the bird beak. So this is how it's represented here. Yeah, he flies up, asks Dad, can you provide me some shelter? Throws a rock. There the rock landed. So now the tule could fly down, had a resting space. It was really small, and the waves would keep crashing on the rock, and he'd keep getting his feet wet, and he'd keep running over the other side. It's like this is not happening, Dad. So he flies back up to the great creator, and was like, look, it's just not working. Like, is there any way you could perhaps get me some more land? So this time, the father threw down a great hook. And the hook came down to the oceans, down to the depths, to the bottom of the ocean, where it hooked onto, and as he pulled it up, another island formed. And so there the tule, we say that is the first two oldest islands of Samoa. So that's Manua
and the tuli then was lonely. I was wanting more, right, children. So it was like, well, nobody to hang out with, and then the father sort of threw down a plant, and this plant grew and grew and grew, and then it rotted, and out of that kind of mush, the worms sort of formed, and from those worms, Tangaloa came down and formed arms and legs, and actually, it's a really interesting pattern. This anuwhe. And I used to look at it and go, a worm? It's like, it's not really kind of impressive, is it? But then when I, really started to unpack our creation myth, I was like, this is the genesis of creation. This really simple form. And then years later, I actually found an article that had some scientists had just found these fossils of our earliest living human relation, and it was a worm. So I was like, how's that for knowledge that goes so far back into the earth that we can't explain it. Yeah, so that's anuwhe, and he's the worm, but of course, that's all this procreative power, and there's our bent knee of the bird. But then what I love is, you have that kind of one meaning, but then if you play with these patterns, then they mean something else. There's this saying we have, let your birds play and you shall have flowers. Winning art prizes. Here's one bird, there's two birds, there's three birds, there's four birds. So out of a very simple pattern, like just taking that, you can actually really play with that. Yeah, and again, that very simple sort of pattern, relates back to this huge big, creation story. What else have we got? Oh yes, we've got, this is one of my favorites. And usually every village will have its own little atua, and then every family will have like an atua as well, like a god, goddess. And again, I like the word atua, it's non-gendered. You don't have to go atua or gods, goddesses, you just go the atua. So, yeah. So you can see I am covered in these. It is one of my favourites. And again, I never asked for these. I didn't rock up to the tafunga and go, oh, I'd love to be like, can I? They're like, they just really look at you, and that's why you've got to know your story. So this is the centipede. And in the islands, they're huge. And they bite. And they'll poison, they'll kill you. They're like, you do not want to, you do not want to sleep with one. But they love to like climb in, because they're like finding, and what's one of the nice warm spots in your body? They love getting in there. I don't know, I have so many friends that have woken up with these, and you can't panic, because if you panic, then they'll bite. And if they bite you in there, the poison goes like,
how big are they?
Oh,
because
and about,
because they exist also in the soil as microorganisms.
Yeah, that's right. So they're another really.
Well, maybe they are not poisonous.
Well, they're so small, they're poison.
They can also bite.
Yeah. But one of the other lessons you can take from the centipede, which we call whaatua loa. So that literally means the little god. He's just a little guy. Little god, not a big god, a little one. But they shed, in order to grow, they shed their skin. So that is a reminder for us not to be so rigid that you cannot change.
and that you need to shed your skin in order to do this. So it, you know, it's not just the fact that it's got the warrior, but it's a reminder, and it reminds me never to be so rigid. So rigid. Well, we'll go back. So we've got loads of stars, and see how the patterns create the meta. Yeah, here's my metaverse. Now our stars were so important because that's how they navigated on those oceans. And you know, well, they used the winds, they used the birds, they used fish, but the stars were really important. And this is another lesson for, you know, you do need a map, you know, because if you drift, especially when there's little dots in the islands, if you miss, that could be a matter of life and death. So knowing where you're going really helps. So yeah, and again, yeah, those are just different variations. Oh, this one though, this one is the tepe tepe. It's a jellyfish. Yeah, I love that as a word. And sometimes he's like a little star, and then and then he's also that, and that is the starfish. And a lot of those were particularly for women, and I think a lot of the role of the woman was a lot of their food gathering was in the shallows. The men would do the big walkers out into the ocean, bring back the big fish, but the woman would be sort of in the shore. We also have those three dots. And again, different islands, it means different things. For me, we call it, this is the face of the coconut. Two eyes and the mouth. Yeah. An amazing love story of how the coconut came to the islands. One of our great atua, Sina, she's one of our sort of, one of our superwoman. So she was well educated, she could make things, she could sing, she would be hanging out with gods. She was like she's a badass bitch. So Sina would go and bathe in the pond every day. It's hot in the islands, you know, and they would wash twice a day. She happened to bathe in the pond where Tuna, the great atua of eels, lived, and he fell in love with her. Well, there's different versions, or else the other version is like he decided to take her, and so he came. So it depends what island you're from, which really interests me, because it really is like the psyche of the island. Like in Samoa, it's a really jealous, bad story, and I'm always like, I like the Cook Island version, where it's consensual, and they form a relationship. Now this was totally, when it was discovered by the village, they were like, oh no, hell no, like you know. So they concocted a plan to drain the pond and to kill him. So when he was floundering around without any water, they chopped off his head. But before they did that, he cried out to his lover and was just like, Sina, if you cherish my face, you know, take my head. And then if you bury this head and nurture this head, a plant will grow. And so, so she did. Yeah, so there's, and the little, you know, and this big tree with the big fronds came, and there it bore fruit. And when it falls to the ground, she was once again reunited with the face of her lover. And when to drink from the coconut, you pierce a hole in here, and you drink. So you are kissing the mouth of Tuna. You are kissing a god. It's much better than drinking out of the carton. But it was, I mean, it's a powerful story because even in his death, he provided not just for her, but for the welfare of the whole village. Because without the coconut, you would not survive in the islands. I think there's like 200 different things you can do with a coconut. You know, you can build from the fiber. You make the rope that binds the houses together. You can feed newborn babies on the coconut milk. It's that full of nutrition. So this is our little humble, hairy coconut guy is one of the most powerful figures that we have. And so that's and I carry tuna just on my little fingertips there. Yeah, you can see there that there is the four sides of the house. And I had, and then on this, people think it's religious, but it's actually the Southern Cross. And that's a navigational thing. That's basically, you can get from Samoa to Aotearoa if you know how to read those stars. So, yeah, that always reminds me to look out for the Southern Cross. So that's pretty much on my hand. So it's one of those things where, because people go, oh, what do they mean? What does that mean? And sometimes I'll tell you one thing, sometimes, it all depends how much I like you. But because also, too, it means many, many different things, many, many different layers. So I can tell you, oh, yeah, that's a bird, that's a centipede. Those are the stars. But then also those other layers that come in help to build up a much bigger story about who I am and how I'm placed, and how I see the world. So those on these.
I understood right that not you decide, the practicer. These people.
That's
decide.
right. It's like for a true tafunga, you wouldn't even dare ask. But he will ask from you, where are you from? He'll talk story with you, talk about your stories. Maybe you're more of a mountain person than a sea person. Because there's lots of there's lots
but
of.
you tell the story, so
You've got to be in charge of your story. So it's the ika, the fish, and again, really simple, basic sort of line drawings that actually hold really complex sort of layers of connection and who you belong to. Lots of net patterns. You find lots of net patterns. I love the way they put the net patterns there. It's like, let's go fishing. So it's awesome. Yeah.
Now, can you see similarities between you and your brother, like the family? Can you see
there's certain patterns that we both share. Like we both have those. He carries his along the back. So there's definitely, but for Māori, for an Aotearoa, that they get really like different tribal areas have specific patterns that only they will use. It's getting a little mixed up now, but there's still these kind of sort of rigorous debates going on in the community to ensure that they're really kind of not just, it has to develop, but they still want to make sure that you can tell somebody from that place to that place. And for me, when I look at, I was saying my son, his girlfriend is from Italy, and they came from London back to New Zealand, and she had a tattoo on her arm, and it was Tahitian, and of course I'm like, just politely, oh yes, where'd you get that? I was giving her a prod, and she was just like, and then she was like, oh.
But does she know where it's from?
No,
So that's why I was just like, like.
So it shows how the patterns get.
That's right.
Dissolved.
That's right. And then she wanted to have another one, and that's when I was sort of like, sit down. No, I wasn't like that. I really love them, but I love them. But I was like, these, I tell the history, and then she was really quite ashamed, and then she didn't. I said, but I was like, I guarantee you, because she comes down from Puglia, from southern Italy. I said, I guarantee you that you've got 5,000 years that you can tap into with your stories and your patterns. A lot of our old patterns that we find on our skin were also found on the clay work from the Lapita pottery. And I said to her, go look in your weaving, go look in your pottery. And she's been on this adventure, and then she's actually even found a tattoo practice from Puglia, not even just from Italy, but from Puglia. Then she found another academic lady who's studying the same thing. Then she's has been working with a Maori practitioner, learning how to hand poke, and now she's actually starting to use the patterns from her own research onto her friends. And I was just like, that's and these patterns that we share too. So that really excited me, that it's all there. You just got to see the clues where our ancestors have left for us. Yeah, but if I didn't know that to look in the carving and to look in the weaving and to look in that those are transferable patterns and stories. And they're telling us, and it's sitting in front of our faces. So I've never looked at pottery the same way again. And sure enough, so that's sort of one resource that you can tap into when you're sort of looking for wood, like, what's mine? Where can I sit? And I heard a beautiful thing where, in terms of the difference between appropriation and appreciation. As I said, sometimes it's about relationships. This was my rapi was a gift. And some, I've definitely been challenged. Why have you got that? But I tell them the story, and they go, oh, that's that's beautiful. And then another, I think he's a dancer, but it's just like it's not how you insert yourself into the story. It's how you find your place in the story. My place was the relationship that I had with my friends. So it's not that nobody's not entitled to go and exchange with another cultural practice, but it's just the way that you come in, and that sort of just the respect and understanding. But we can talk more over lunch. There's like a few more patterns I can draw up. But basically after lunch, my challenge to you is we're going to use this paper, draw around 2 hands. We should have time. And I would like you to draw me a tattoo that tells me about you through patterns. And we're going to start there, and then I'll take you on an adventure. So definitely have some lunch, so you've got some fuel to get into the next phase. And see, you've got no excuse if I can draw like this. So maybe over lunch, just maybe have a little think about some ways that you can express your mountain, your people, or things that are important to you. I love working with kids. They oh my gosh, my favorite pattern, I think, was this. It was his pussy cat. I was like, so good, huh? Yeah. Oh, here's another. Weaving is very important, and this is how they express weaving. This webs and warps, and of course that then you play
play with the patterns. Sometimes, you know, you throw a little thing into this guy. But I love the weaving pattern too because it's about your genealogy. It's you who came before you, who came and, you know, so, and how we say society is like a mat woven because we're all connected through the weaving. So that's why the weaving pattern is so important. So those are.
But in a way, this tattooing is about the cycles of life, kind of, because with the coconut, it's the death, and then out of the death, something new happens. So yeah, I just was wondering, is it all about life, and where is death? I mean, but in a way, it's the cycle of life.
Yeah, that particular story is, you know, I suppose the fishing, there's also things that are just what they directly see in front of them. It's just that, you know, this was all in our immediate visual.
Yeah.
Like now we look out and we see these buildings, but there's incredible patterns going on in there too. But it's like, do you want to put them on your skin, whatever? And also, we didn't have writing. This was our books. As I said, this was our Google. Our Google that. Oh yes, look, you know. So there's so many, you know, and the stories that you're telling. Like people read my body at home. The people who understand the patterns, they can read my body like a book. I'm an open book. But yeah, let's close this section down. Have some lunch, and then after lunch we can actually get drawing. So thank you.
Thank you so much.